Hi, and welcome back to the Beauty Lab podcast. I'm your host, Monina, and my co-host, Velia. So today we have a very interesting topic that actually was kind of a thing that started to come up again, like last year or like past couple of years for boys.
Yep.
Right? And that topic is all about perms. So if you're a child of the 80s, you've experienced this. But today, Velia is going to do a deeper dive on perms. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Welcome to the Beauty Lab podcast, your drive time resource for all things beauty, health, and wellness. We're your hosts and favorite beauty nerds, Monina and Velia.
Join us as we debunk myths, explore the latest trends, and dive deep into the science behind your favorite products. We'll interview industry experts and answer your burning beauty questions in 30 minutes or less. So my first question is, what is actually the history of perms? Like, I'm thinking, how did someone actually come up with this whole concept?
Yeah.
You know?
I know. So the history of perms is actually really kind of like super fascinating and also a little scary. So perms stand for permanent waving, in case you were like, what does even a perm mean? So the history kind of looks like this. There was a German guy named Karl Ludwig Nessler in 1906 who came up with this permanent waving machine. And he actually changed his name a couple times. So he was Karl Ludwig Nessler, then he was Charles Nessler, then at some point he changed his name to Charles Nestle for, I don't know why, I'm sure there's like a really fun story behind that.
I was just going to say, in relation to the Nestle company?
Not to my knowledge, but don't quote me on that. So he came up with this permanent waving machine because his wife wanted curly hair. And the very first permanent waving machine was made around 1906. And it looked like a chandelier. So this big machine hung from the ceiling, and it had these long wires with brass rods attached at the ends. And you would wrap your hair around these brass rods. And then he made this chemical solution made with like cow urine. And then later it evolved into like borax paste. And I'm assuming the cow urine, and this is literally just an assumption based on zero facts whatsoever, was for the urea in the cow urine.
I was just going to say, probably has to do with the urea. And isn't it interesting, though, if you've had a perm, doesn't it smell like that?
It smells like rotten eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect.
Foul.
Foul, very foul. So when you say urine, yeah,
you're like, not a lot's changed.
Still has that aroma.
Right? Still smells as good as it did in 1906. And so he would wrap the hair around these rods, and then the rods were connected to these wires, like I said, and they would heat with either electricity or gas. Like at first it was gas. And you would sit there for 6 hours with these.
6 hours?
It looked like a torture device. Like if you see pictures of it, it looked like a torture device. And then he brought his invention to the United States and opened beauty shops to offer this service. And women flocked to these beauty shops because no different than today, women in the early 1900s really wanted that curly hair. So then it sort of evolved, and around 1928-ish, a woman named Marjorie Joyner, an African-American woman, actually made a safer, more efficient, more compact version that didn't just add curl, but it also had the ability to straighten out curl as well. So that's kind of the very beginnings of the perm. And then in like the 70s, obviously nothing was connected to wires anymore, and they changed like the whole process in general.
Because they probably realized the solution was what kept the curls, probably.
Yeah, between the solution and the heat, because it expands the cuticle layer and it changes the structure of the hair.
Now his name was Ludwig, right?
Karl Ludwig Nessler.
Nessler. Did he come from the beauty industry? Like, or was it just a need his wife had and he created this?
To my knowledge, he had nothing to do with the beauty industry. He was like a scientist.
Okay.
And he just was trying to create this machine that would,
Interesting.
Wow.
Wow. So it was an actual machine. Wow.
Yes, it was a giant machine, big scary looking thing. Yeah, looked like a octopus.
That is so amazing.
Yeah, it's actually really cool.
It's fascinating too. And it kind of goes to show women, if it has the end result they want,
they'll do anything.
They'll do it. Even if it looks like a torture machine.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of stories around like the trial and error of him getting it correct, because he had to wait a lot of times for his wife's hair to grow back out because he cinched it so many times.
Okay, that's dedication.
Right? For both of them. Yeah.
Wow. A lot of trust there for the wife.
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
But, all right. Well, thank you, Ludwig.
Yes, thanke you, Charles
Nestler,
Nestler,
Nestle, whatever you want to go by.
Charles.
Thank you. Okay, my second question is, what types of perms do we use today? Like, obviously it's different now.
Yeah. So today, the two main kinds of perms that we use are an alkaline perm, which is also known as like a cold wave. So there's no heat used at all. It's a higher pH and it swells the hair using a chemical called ammonium thioglycolate. And the alkaline perms give you more of a tighter curl. And then there's an acid perm that are used for more like body waves. So it's a lower pH, so it allegedly doesn't damage your hair as much, because the alkaline perms are really damaging. And that's an acidic solution. The chemical is usually glycerol monothioglycolate.
So if I wanted waves like your hair, I would do more the acidic type, because I don't want it too tight.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be, I mean, based on, in general, yes. I'm going to just say yes to answer that question.
Yeah, because I'm looking at your hair, it's like just a nice wave, as opposed to the alkaline is a lot tighter, you said.
Alkaline, yeah, exactly.
A tighter curl. Okay. All right, so now you know, if you know how tight, you can ask your stylist. Now, do all stylists know how to perm?
All stylists, at least in California, because I can only really speak for what I'm sure it's in every state, but definitely in California, you have to learn how to use a perm, do a perm, wrap a perm, in order to get your cosmetology license. Yes.
Got it.
It doesn't mean that, they ever do them ever again in their careers.
Yeah.
But
they're trained.
They're trained.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Good to know. Okay. Third question. Can you explain how it works and maybe just walk us through a process for people who've never done it or are looking to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about like the different terms that we sort of hear when we talk about perms. So body waves, anytime you hear body wave, beach wave, spiral perm, a root perm. If you don't know what a root perm is literally just that. You just are perming the root of somebody's hair, not like the entire strand. And that's just for adding volume. And it wasn't really meant to be like you wear that style, like you just wear like a curly root and the straight ends. It's more like with the intention of it being blow dried later.
Right, like for me, because that's really where I want my volume is in the roots.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Root perm would
a
be
root
something.
perm. And then there's a partial perm where you don't have to perm. Like let's say you have natural curl, but the front of your hair, because this is pretty common with natural curl, doesn't get as curly as the rest of your hair. You could actually just perm the front. You don't have to do a perm everywhere to kind of try to mimic the natural wave pattern that you have. And then there's like customizable, where you can do looser in some places, tighter in other places. I mean, they're pretty versatile. And then there's a digital perm, which is additional training. Like in cosmetology school, you don't learn a digital perm. In fact, a digital perm is fairly new-ish, over like maybe the last 15 or something, maybe 20 years, was originated in Asia for really coarse Asian, like straight Asian hair. And it's also used with a machine, not like the Nestler machine, but a digital perm machine. And the process is a little bit different. And it's basically for, Asian women or men who have that really, really coarse straight hair that just won't bend at all, to have a loose wave put in. So at least they could either wear it that way or they could blow dry or style, just to kind of break up that really strong structure of their hair.
Okay, that's really interesting because a few years ago, I was like, I wish I had more body, and I was reading up, but it wasn't called a digital perm, it was called a Japanese perm.
Oh, okay.
And so when you said it originated in
Yeah.
the Asian culture, that makes sense.
It's probably a digital perm.
Digital perm, yeah. Okay, so if you have coarse Asian hair, it's going to be called a digital perm.
Well, I mean,
Maybe.
yeah, that is the one that originated in Asia. That I really truly don't know the process of that one. I was never trained with that particular
And you
system.
said that one actually uses a machine.
That one uses a machine, yeah. So, but then to kind of talk about the chemical process of a perm. So basically what you're doing is you're changing the structure of your hair by breaking the disulfide bonds. So there's different types of bonds in your hair, and the disulfide bonds are the strongest bonds in your hair, and there's very few things that could actually change them. One would be like melting off your hair, right? That's breaking the disulfide bonds. The other is to do a relaxer, like a sodium hydroxide relaxer, which is pretty commonly used when you have really, really curly hair and you want it straight. And that's more like typically used in like the African American salons. And then a perm. So a perm is extremely damaging, extremely damaging. You can't break the disulfide bonds without it being a really damaging process. But to explain kind of what happens, you wash the hair and you wrap it typically in a perm rod. So I'm sure everyone has seen a head of perm rods. Now you don't have to use a perm rod. You can take your hair and actually braid it and use perm solution on it to change your straight hair to a permanent braided sort of look. And then when you take it out, you have those waves. That's much less commonly known. But basically what the perm solution does, and we'll just use the example of it's in a perm rod. Okay, so you wash the hair, you wrap the hair in perm rods, and then the waving solution goes on, and what it does is it goes in all the way into your cortex of the inner layer of your hair, and it breaks up all the disulfide bonds. And then you rinse that out, and now your hair is like, I don't know who I am anymore. It's like having a total identity crisis. So then you rinse that out for a long time, and then you put the neutralizer on. So there's a two-step process. And the neutralizer basically goes in and it re-hardens those disulfide bonds to the shape that it currently is in. So because it's in a rod, a perm rod, it will take on the shape of the perm rod. If it was in a braid, it'll take on the shape of the braid. Now the braid, you know how we're always telling you not to be scared to do things at home? This is something you never, ever, 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 ever want to do at home, and you should absolutely be scared to do this at home.
Doing your own perm.
Doing your own perm. Okay. Because you can totally buy perm solution, like buy a box of perm solution and neutralizer at like Sally's Beauty Supply, but you have to have this super thorough consultation with a professional who knows about perms before you ever should put these kinds of chemicals on your hair. I've seen so many disasters when it comes to perms. And then that's it. Your hair is toast.
Yeah.
But just to continue, the neutralizer rehardens the bonds, and then you rinse the neutralizer, and then when you take the perm rods out, now your hair is in the shape of the perm rod. So that's the process.
Wow. Okay. I remember the solutions and it's stinking and all that.
Yeah. The waving solution is the one that stinks. Yeah. The neutralizer doesn't really have a smell.
There's no smell. But you need the neutralizer to stop the changing of the breaking down of those bonds that you're talking about.
If you took the hair out of the rod before neutralizing, so waving solution, rinse, and then you take it won't be in a curl. It will not curl. And I've never actually tried this before, not even like on a mannequin head, but it'll just kind of be damaged and frizzy and
no purpose.
No purpose. Like you basically just like damaged your hair for nothing, because it's not going to look any better. It's not going to look any different. Even
probably look worse.
It'll look like a broom.
Oh, yeah. No, not what I want.
So that's what you're going
on
for.
my head.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the time frame usually for this process?
Like, how long does it take? Depending on how long your hair is, a couple of hours usually. Like, so the perm solution can only stay on your hair. So like the wrapping and all that kind of stuff takes the longest, because it's pretty intricate and you have to do it a very specific way, and you have to make sure that the rods and the bands on the rods are not like pulling your hair, because your hair is so fragile during this process. The perming solution only stays on for maybe 10 to 20 minutes tops, like tops. That's like, and then you rinse for like 5 minutes, neutralize for 5 minutes, rinse again for 5. So just that part of the process takes about a half hour. Yeah, you're looking at about 2 hours, unless you have really long hair.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the bulk of it is you rolling the
Yes.
hair. Okay.
Yeah. And
so like my hair would take probably 3 hours or something like that.
for your hair, yeah, it would take probably even longer.
Take a while.
Depending on who's doing it. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Been trying to convince her to give me a perm.
No.
She wants my hair to stay healthy.
Yeah. No, it's not happening.
How about a root perm? I'll work on it.
Yeah, a root perm might be a consideration.
All right.
Yeah.
She might consider it.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
My show with curly hair.
Yeah,
someday.
Monina comes to the next episode looking like Ronald McDonald, then, she got her way.
She wouldn't do that to me. But thank you guys. Always coming here every week. We hope you find value in what we talk about. And if there's something we haven't touched on yet, please always let us know. And if you could take some time right now to just like, share, subscribe. Also, more importantly, if you feel this could benefit anyone or any of our past episodes, please share it with those friends you think would find value. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I do have 2 more questions. Okay. So the next question is, then who is a good candidate for a perm? Like if somebody walks in and they ask for a perm, even though it's going to be damaging, like is there a perfect candidate for a perm?
Yeah. So funny enough, more recently, the people who want perms are like teenage boys, because they have this like really specific kind of curly style, like I call broccoli hair, but
it's a trend.
It is. It's a trend.
So many boys want their hair perm.
Right. And so a teenage boy is actually a really good candidate for a perm. And the reason being, their hair is not super long. Chances are they haven't had any highlights or color or anything like that in their hair.
So their hair is super healthy to begin with.
Super healthy. And that hair, worst case scenario, and this is worst case scenario, something goes wrong. Boys can just cut their hair really short and, start regrowing it. It's not that big of a deal. That hair that's living on their head, if it's just a few inches long, like 4 inches long, is only like less than a year old. So it's very healthy hair. So somebody with very healthy hair would be a really good candidate, which eliminates about 95% of the people who want a perm. Okay. So I have had lots of clients who have asked about a perm, and 9.5 out of 10 of them I have said absolutely not. It wouldn't, no way. Not because I don't think it will look good, and sometimes it is because of that, but it's because of the health of their hair. If you have ever had highlights, which is why I say no to you, because we have highlighted your hair, even though we've covered those highlights since, that hair has still been highlighted on your head.
Yeah, it's still there.
Any hair that's been highlighted is going to melt off with a perm. It'll melt off. Don't test that theory. It will melt off. I've seen it. And when I was teaching cosmetology school, there are a couple people who came in for perms, and the consultation is always very thorough. Like, when is the last time you had your hair highlighted? When is the last time you had color? And some people just lie, and you can't you can't tell that they're lying. If you told me you haven't had highlights, I wouldn't be able to tell that you had highlights. Your hair is all one color at this point, but that doesn't mean that you don't have highlights under there that are just covered. So what happened in the cosmetology school was the woman came in with hair this long, and we did the perm. We wound up having to cut it basically into a pixie cut because all of her ends melted off, halfway up her head. It was so traumatizing for the student. The student did everything right. The teacher working with that student confirmed all of the things because we all know about how perms go. And yeah, her hair melted, and she took responsibility for it, thank God. She was like, oh, I didn't realize the highlights I had 6 months ago counted, even though I've covered them. So anyway, there's that. Who else is a candidate? So the thing about perms is if you Pinterest permed hair, whatever, long hair perm or whatever you would say, you're going to come up with pictures that are not a perm. They're like a curling iron curl. And I'm going to tell everybody right now, there's no way a perm is ever going to look like you just used a curling iron on your head. It doesn't look like that. Perms, think about the 80s and the really big frizzy.
Yeah, they were frizzy. Almost looked like a fro.
Yeah.
On their hair. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a curl, but it looks dry.
Yeah, you still had to style it. I do remember, if you wanted that natural looking curl, you almost ended up spending more time styling the permed hair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So did I answer your question about who can have a perm aside from teenage boys?
Yeah.
I guess anyone who has had pretty much no color,
almost virgin hair.
Yeah, virgin
or
hair.
You've grown it out for at least a couple of years and had nothing done to it. And if you don't understand why it would take a couple of years, please go back to the episode where we talk about
hair growth
and the different stages of hair growth, because there's one stage that's pretty long, couple of years. And if that piece of hair is still on your head, that is not compatible with the perm. It sounds like to me, right?
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I'd almost have to cut all my hair off and let it grow out for it to be considered a good candidate for perm.
Okay. Exactly.
All right.
I know it's not very encouraging, but perms are not something you want to mess around with.
Yeah.
You don't want to F around and find out with perms.
Right. Yeah, and that's probably why you don't get that request too often too, because it can be scary because you are changing the structure of your hair.
I get the requests so much more than you would ever imagine.
Okay.
And that's what I said, 9.5 times out of 10, it's an absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good stylist.
Yeah.
So she's looking out for the health of your hair.
And what's funny is most of the time when I get requests for a perm, it's for someone who already has natural wave in their hair, and they just don't understand how to work with their own natural wave, which, is so much easier to just learn how to style your natural wave than it would be to get a perm. Have you ever had a perm?
Yeah, in the 80s.
Yeah, I had 2 perms in my life.
I had them all the time. I mean, in the 80s, because my hair is that Asian stick straight hair and just didn't want to do anything. So it was flat to my head, didn't know how to style it. So I thought, well, a perm will at least give me volume. And it did. It did give me the volume, but like you said, I think it took me longer to style it in the morning than just having the straight hair.
I had one when I was 10 years old, and then I had one, so obviously I didn't have any color in my hair. And then I had one in high school, and I shouldn't have. The stylist should not have permed my hair.
Because had you already been coloring your hair?
I had been coloring my hair,
Got it. Wow.
Yeah, and my hair looked, bad. It didn't look good.
Yeah, good. All right, good.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I just thought, my hair's pretty healthy, but you got to take into consideration the actual condition of your hair.
Yeah, and no amount of Olaplex is going to fix that. So
yes,
don't even go there. You're like, well, I use Olaplex. No.
One more question. If somebody gets a perm, how long would that last before they had to perm it again?
So that's a great question, because perming on previously permed hair is also a thing that you need to be careful of. So to answer your question, you let's pretend that you're a good candidate for a perm and you got a perm. Your perm would last about 3 months, meaning you'll probably see some curl when you wet your hair and you kind of scrunch it. You'll see some curl still on the ends. Of course, as your hair grows out, it's still going to grow out the way your natural hair structure is. So you're going to have like straight roots and then like some wave left at the end. You'll continue to have the benefit of the wave from your perm for around 3 months. Could be a little longer depending on the products you're using at home and all that kind of stuff. However, that hair, even 5 months later, after you've not seen any wave anymore, that hair is still considered previously permed hair. So you have to tell your stylist or whoever's doing the perm, if you want another perm, I have had a perm before.
Because it goes back to the category highlights and coloring the hair prior to that first perm.
Yes.
So then that person literally, to keep it healthy, then what you're saying is that the permed hair needs to be gone before they perm it again.
It doesn't have to be gone, but they do have to adjust the type of perm they use because there are perms made for previously permed hair, which is basically just a more gentle formula, and that's very important to disclose.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So would you suggest then going to a stylist that does perms like on a regular basis then?
Definitely. And good luck finding that.
Yeah.
Because there's not very many.
Well, based on what you just said, if they're a responsible stylist,
Yeah.
they shouldn't have a ton because they're trying to explain to their clients it's not the most healthiest route to take for their hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, there's the whole like little old lady perm, trope. And that works for older women because their hair is really short. And the reason they're perming it is they have this whole like every 3 months they get a perm, and then like every week they go in and they get their hair like washed and set in rollers, and the perm helps the roller set last a whole week. And so that's like but their hair is this long.
Yeah, sure.
And exactly. And they're getting that cut off, with almost all of that hair cut off.
Yeah, within 3 months or so.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Actually, so strangely enough, and this actually happened to me when I was in cosmetology school. I permed a client who had henna in their hair. And if you don't know what henna is a natural plant-based hair color. And it's really just like either black or like a deep brownish red. And the client, again, during my consultation, did not tell me that she had henna in her hair. And the way that henna works, it's not damaging. Henna is not damaging, which is why it's used so often in certain cultures, usually like Indian cultures. It coats the top layer of your hair, like it makes it super shiny. Don't go out and get henna. Don't pause here and then go get henna because you heard shiny. Henna really limits what you can do to your hair after you use henna. Like, so if you try to color your hair with regular hair color after having henna in your hair, it won't take the same way. Also with perms, it doesn't take a perm at all. The perm solution did nothing. Nothing. I permed this woman's hair and did it totally right. Like, because you're very supervised in cosmetology school. And her hair was still completely straight. Wow. So if you have henna in your hair, talk to your stylist before you get a perm.
So the henna prevents the breaking down of those bonds you were talking about.
I'm not entirely sure what happens, but what happens is you won't get any curl.
Yeah.
And then your color will also look kind of funky because there is some kind of chemical reaction because you do see the reddish brown color sort of coming out when you're rinsing, but then it like looks spotty and kind of weird. So yeah, it's just kind of, and then your hair smells like after a couple of months.
Your hair smells like ammonia.
It does. It has a smell on it. That smell sticks around for a while because your hair is like a sponge.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
So obviously I am pro perm. No, I am, but there's a very small percentage of people who...
Well, now I understand why, Well, that was Perm 101.
Yep.
for everybody who ever wanted to do a perm. Now you know what kind of candidates are actually a good fit for the perm.
Yes.
And if you do get your perm or you've had a perm, please send us your story.
I want to know your perm stories.
Yes, perm stories.
Sure.
That would be great. Please reach out to us. Again, thank you so much for joining us every week. We hope you enjoy our topics. And if there's a topic, like I said, we haven't covered yet, please let us know. But my name's Monina.
I'm Velia.
Until next time,
Keep experimenting with your beauty routine. Okay, this is for real now. Show is
Okay. Let me see their side profile. Let me see if anything's sticking up. Okay, you're good.
hang on. There's always something annoying about my hair.
Today we're going to talk...
Let's do that again. I don't know what this was.
jazz hands.
Okay, all right. No jazz hands, no jazz hands.